I'm Courtney Boyce.
I'm Derek Olthius, and you're listening to Drop Jaw Podcast.
Boom!
I'm Lance Egan, and I forgot what I was supposed to say.
At the end of the day, realistically, we're throwing hooks covered in feathers at fish. You can't take that too seriously.
It wasn't a flat hike. It was definitely a steep drop, like a parachute would have been good.
Stick 'em solid.
Welcome to the Drop Jaw Flies podcast, your source for fly fishing talk, tips, and stories. In this episode, Jason and I visit with U.S. National Fly Fishing Champion Lance Egan. Lance has been a member of Fly Fishing Team USA for years and has competed in tournaments all over the world. This guy is absolutely one of the best. We meet up with Lance on the beautiful Provo River to talk fly selection, competition fishing, European-style nymphing, and more. If you enjoy our podcast, let us know. Please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, and our YouTube channel. I am Chad Nelson along with my co-host Jason Arvey. Here is today's podcast.
Hey, Drop Jaw friends. We are here with special guest and just fly fishing extraordinaire, Mr. Lance Egan.
Superstar.
And, yes, thank you for coming on board.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Everybody knows Lance, or they should, because he's been on Fly Fishing Team USA for a decade?
Yeah, a little more than a decade. I got on in 2003, and so too long.
A familiar face as the fly fishing manager at Cabela's.
Just the glorified peon in the fishing department at Cabela's.
Most knowledgeable guy. Go to Cabela's, you need anything, have a question, Lance can answer about fly fishing. Has helped me a lot in the past. So.
Is that where you guys met, at Cabela's?
It was before that.
It was before Cabela's for sure. I don't know exactly where we met. Probably a casting competition somewhere.
Yeah, I think that first year that Jim Gunderson, either his first or second year that he'd won the Best of the West, I think it may have been there.
Could be.
So it was somewhere in there.
Yes.
It's been a while.
That would have been a long time ago. That was probably 2001, 2002, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe even before that when you worked at Fish Tech. Way back there. Well, because you did work at Fish Tech then.
I did work at Fish Tech then, yes.
Awesome.
It's been a while.
It's been a long time. Who knows, right?
Right. We're getting old. That's why we don't remember.
We can cloud our memory with mayflies and caddis, but meetings, not too worried about that.
So Lance, I wanted to ask you about Team USA. Mm-hmm. You just won. You're the national champion.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So awesome.
It's good to be lucky.
So for guys that aren't familiar with how that works, kind of explain what it takes to become a member of Team USA and then how the competition works.
Okay, so Team USA runs on a point system. It's run solely on numbers. Basically, you go to regional competitions, and then from regionals you can qualify for nationals. And depending on whether we're in a 1 year or 18-month or 2-year cycle, they change them based on world championships. So we have world championships each year, and sometimes if you have a world championship in September and then the next year there's one in May, there's not enough time between the two to have a full cycle for points, so they'll sometimes run a 2-year cycle. But assuming if you had world championships, let's just say for theory's sake, if they were all in June, then they would just run 1-year cycles. But there's always a cycle that top points earners, so top 15 points earners in the country make Team USA. No favoritism, no anything going on there, just strictly run by points. So if you show up and you do well at the competitions consistently, you make the 15-man team, and then 6 people, basically 5 and an alternate of the 15, go to the World Championships each year.
So cool. Can anybody enter those regional competitions?
They can, yeah. They fill up quite fast, but they're certainly open to the public. They post them on Facebook. They post them on the flycomps.com website. So anybody can show up. Anybody can enter. It's not a limited thing or by invitation only. It's open to anybody. It doesn't get. I would argue we probably have less than 500 people in the country that some half-heartedly and some wholeheartedly, try it out for the team, if you will. We certainly we have some very, very good anglers. We also have some competition anglers that are relatively new to the sport, and I think it'd be unfair to say that all the best anglers in the country are competition anglers, because there are a lot of great guides and a lot of great anglers that have no interest in competition fishing.
Yeah. Cool. Now you're headed to Worlds soon, is that right?
Yeah, we head to the World Championships in September. It's in Vail, Colorado this year, which is the first time we've had a World Championship in the U.S. since '97, I believe. It was in Jackson Hole. So it'll be cool to have it on our soil and have maybe a slight advantage. We'll see how that pans out. But we set ourselves up last year by finally earning a medal in the World Championships as a country. I think this will be my 10th World Championship, somewhere in there, 10th or 11th. And we'd never medaled until last year in Bosnia. It was our first time. We were silver medalists finally. That was kind of a bucket list item for me, check off a World Championship medal. So that was really fun, and now we have the work ahead of us to try and duplicate, maybe even move up a slot, and that would be the goal, of course, in Vail.
That'd be awesome. So, and I know that the European nymphing technique is pretty much universally used, right, in those competitions, or at least a high percentage technique that people use.
Yes.
Will you use that same technique if it's on a big river? Or,
absolutely, yeah.
So you keep doing that?
Yeah, I mean, you do whatever it takes in competition to catch the most fish. So anybody that studies fly fishing, especially in rivers, and especially for trout, which is what the fly fishing competitions that I participate in focus on, they're basically trout and grayling. If you know anything about trout, you know that they do more than 90% of their feeding below the surface. So you're going to spend a fair bit of time nymph fishing. That's not to say you don't fish dries, because we do. We fish dries, we fish dry in a dropper, we fish streamers, we fish anything that will catch the most fish.
Gotcha.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
You get a very small beat in the competitions, usually on the short end of things 70 or 100 yards of water, on the long end of things maybe 300 yards of water that you work for 3 hours, and your job is to catch as many fish as you can out of there. So I hear a lot of times on forums and websites people kind of knocking competition fishing, saying, oh, the competition guys are only good at catching small fish. And they've obviously never tried it, and that if we only get a fish 100 yards for 3 hours, you don't have the luxury of just trying to catch small fish. You got to catch every fish you can in the beat. So you get, I guess in a nutshell, to be successful at it, you have to learn to catch every fish you can using every technique available, and get as good as you possibly can at each of the techniques.
You bet.
The people that do consistently well are really well-rounded anglers. We have a few people in the competition world that are really good at one technique. Maybe they're really good at European nymphing, but they don't really do dry fly fishing well, or they don't know how to fish a dry and a dropper, have no idea how to fish streamers. And the real crutch a lot of times is lakes. If people don't know how to fish lakes very well, then they don't do very good consistently. But if you do all of those things pretty well, and maybe even add a few other tricks up your sleeve, then you can consistently place very, very high.
That's awesome.
Say you go to a competition, it's multiple days, or is it just one day?
Yeah, it's usually at least 2 days, and most commonly 3 days. In a world championship, it's always 3 days, 5 sessions, 5 3-hour sessions. So I call it coming out in the wash, right? If you get, it's a random draw for your beat selection. You don't get to choose the water you're in. So that's another thing that's different, where everybody that has a favorite river, I grew up fishing the Provo River here just below us, and the Provo River I know fairly well, but if we were to have a competition on it, I wouldn't get to just pick my honey holes, right? They throw you in a random piece of water that you may or may not like to fish. It may not be a water type that suits your favorite techniques, and you just have to adapt. So.
What if you slipped the guy $100 bill and you're like, hey, is there any...
I haven't tried it, but if you'd like to, you can enter one. I don't think it'll get you very far. A lot of the competitions now are getting to where they're competitor controlled, so the guy that's judging you is also in the competition. The World Championships don't run that way, but a lot of our regionals are now running that way.
Smart.
To where, it's hard to cheat if the guy that's judging you also wants to win.
So over those awesome. 5 sessions, are you on river and lake?
Generally, yes. Yeah, usually the most common setup is 3 rivers, 2 lakes.
Okay. And is there bonus points for size of fish, or is it just sheer number, quantity?
There's bonus points, yeah, and there's not bonus points for like a fish out of a slot or something. There's just points for every centimeter of fish you catch. So in most competitions, the standard rule is the fish have to be 20 centimeters to count, which is about 8 inches. So an 8-inch fish or larger will count in the competition. For every scoreable fish, you get an extra 100 points. And then you get 20 points for every centimeter of length. So a big fish outscores a small fish.
Yeah.
But 2 8-inch fish outscore 1 16-inch fish, right?
Yeah,
Because you caught 2 and you get the 100-point bonus.
Yeah.
So it's again, it just comes down to if all of us went down to the river right here and we set up 3 beats and we all caught about the same number of fish, we're going to be within 5 or 10 centimeters maybe max, because you're fishing the same river. The fish tend to average about the same size.
Yeah.
So it's usually about numbers, more so than size. But size can make a difference as far as if it's really tough fishing and you're only catching 1 or 2 fish, then those larger fish add up extra centimeters.
Oh, so cool.
Awesome. Lance, just really quick, if you don't mind explaining, because a lot of our viewers probably don't know a lot about European style nymphing.
Okay.
What is it about that that's so effective?
What is so effective about European nymphing? I think it takes away a lot of handicaps. So most of us in the U.S., myself included, I grew up learning how to nymph fish with strike indicators, right? Split shot. So there's a couple problems that I see with the indicator and split shot technique. And not to say that they don't work, because they obviously do. I've used them for a long time, still do in some situations, and I believe there are times and places where the indicator rig is far and away the best technique. But the handicaps that I'm getting at are twofold, really. Number one, actually, let's make that threefold, okay? So number one, when you have a strike indicator floating on the surface, you're tethered to the surface, and that wants to tow your flies at surface speed. Again, if you've studied nymph fishing or studied trout fishing in rivers, you know that the bottom of the river moves significantly slower than the surface. So if our indicator's towing surface speed, the only way to slow our flies down is to put excess weight on to tick the bottom and slow the drift down, right? So that's problem number one, that indicator rig creates. In a European rig, we don't have anything floating on the surface most of the time. We have a sighter, colored piece of monofilament that we hold above the water with a long rod, and it's not on the surface, it's above the surface. So you still have tippet extending through the water column, but it's usually on the heavy end of things 4x and more commonly 5 or 6x, extending all the way down through the water column. So you lessen that influence of the surface current. That's number one thing. Number two, your strike detection is better, I think. You end up getting, anytime you put sinkers on the line, you are in contact with the sinkers. Now there's good, better, and best ways to rig. I would argue if you're adding weight to the rig, a bounce rig with weights on the bottom is probably your best technique for strike detection. But if you just have the weight of the flies is your weight, then you're in direct contact with your weight or in direct contact with your flies. So your strike detection is better. Otherwise, I think you get better strike detection and you get better better connectivity to your flies. The flies descend quicker because we have a rig that makes it so we have nothing but thin tippet heading through the water column, so it doesn't actually take as much weight to achieve depth. You add those things together and you just end up with a system that works really, really well.
It's efficient.
It's very efficient. Yeah, there's a lot less extra line put into the system. You get better hookups because you have almost no slack. You have instantaneous hook sets instead of moving all of the mended slack that you've added into the system.
Yeah.
And again, there are there's times and places for all techniques. I don't want to sound like I'm poo-pooing all indicators, because there's still times where the indicator is by far the best rig.
But there is like a definite purpose and reason to using European nymphing technique in the competitions and otherwise anywhere.
Yeah, so that's kind of a funny one, in that the rules actually dictate the European style a little bit, in that they don't say you can't fish strike indicators and you can't fish weight. What the rules say is you can't add anything to the leader that would float or sink the leader other than flies. So you can fish a dry and a dropper. You could fish a really large dry with a dropper and in essence fish an indicator rig, right?
Gotcha.
But by definition, you can't add any split shot or any other weight to the leader other than flies. And then there are restrictions therein too. You can't have a single bead. You can have a single bead only up to 4 millimeter. So anything larger than 4 millimeter wouldn't count as well. They have all kinds of restrictions that way. But I think that the rules kind of cause the European technique, if you will. And then once you learn the European style, it's then hard to go back in most situations to an indicator rig because it's just not as efficient.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work as well for you, your motivation to do it goes away.
And this is the rules only for the world competition, right?
That's the FIPS Moosh rules, the international rules, which we also use in our competitions too.
Oh, here in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the idea being, if our goal is to medal at the World Championships and to use their rules, I guess if you played American football and then you wanted to go win Australian rules football, you need to learn all the fine points of Australian rules football, right?
Yeah, you need to practice
You got to change things up a little bit. So just in an effort to get really good at the World Championship rules, we adopt them and make them work in our system as well.
Smart. Yeah, smart.
Got to give a competitive edge to the U.S. somehow, right? Practice the competitors' rules. But so here's a situation where you've got a super fast current, river velocity. Your flies probably have different weights, right?
Various, yeah, lots of weights.
Because like if you're saying, if you're not going to cast a lot of weight out, you're not going to do a lot of mending, but the river is just cruising, you're going to have to tie on a fly or flies that are heavy enough to get down in that amount of time to the fish. So
True.
Your flies, are they more done to weight, or are they specific pattern, or is it you trying to accomplish both?
Yeah, both. You get very imitative still, and you also get just attractor patterns. I think in my experience in the competition world, I came from what the fly fishing magazines feed us: match the hatch, match the hatch, match the hatch. So I think we're almost pushed that to a fault, especially in the U.S., where it makes sense. It's logical to us that if the fish are eating mayfly nymphs that are small, Baetis nymphs, they're eating dark olive nymphs that are size 16, 18, 20, that's what we should imitate, right? And it works to a degree, but I would argue most of the time that attractor flies, when presented properly, actually outproduce really imitative stuff. That's not a hard fast rule, but generally speaking, one of the things I've found in the fly fishing competition world is that we fish attractor flies that imitate almost nothing. If you're familiar with some of my fly patterns, like a red dart, for example, if you look up the red dart on the internet, if you can tell me what that imitates, I need to talk to you. Message me on Facebook. But I have no idea. I call it a circus show of a fly, right? It's all flash, red tail, pink hot spot behind the bead, hairline ice dubbing up the body, a pearl tinsel over the top of ice dubbing, a brown soft tackle. There's nothing in nature that looks like that, but fish eat it, and they eat it readily. So I don't know how or why. I think, though, that we get really focused in fly fishing on the fly. In my 20 plus years of retail experience in fly fishing, I'm amazed at how many people, and I fell into the same trap, how many people come into the shop and they want the silver bullet fly, right? It's the fly that makes the difference, not the technique. They just, their technique is flawless. If they just had the right flies, they'd be catching fish. And in reality, the fly can make a difference, but the technique really trumps the fly. And competition has really shown me that, especially fishing with teammates from around the country in strange places in the world. We all come from different backgrounds, different states, different home waters, where we have our own confidence flies that work on our home water. We all go to a strange place. Last year we went to Bosnia. Who thinks of fly fishing in Bosnia? In the U.S., virtually unheard of. It's actually a fairly popular European destination, but for us, not even entering our fly fishing mind, right? So we go to Bosnia, and as a team, we go and pre-fish, practice on the rivers, each river a different day. And at the end of the day, over dinner, usually we get a big piece of foam and put all the flies that worked in the foam as a team. And collectively, we try and, filter out what's working best and this and that. Well, over the years of doing that same process at regional competitions, national competitions, and world competitions, inevitably all the flies in the foam are different. They're different sizes, different colors, different everything. and yet we all yield kind of the same results. And to me, that just tells you that there's not very much to the fly. I wish that there was, a little bit. The fly can make a difference. We've all had the day where you have the fly that just is knocking them dead. The fish can't stand to leave alone. But most of the time, just fishing the fly properly makes a big difference.
And were a lot of those, again, attractor patterns, though?
Yeah, a lot of times they'd be attractor patterns for sure, but sometimes imitative as well.
Yeah.
Well, I think I learned that early on, Lance, when I would go to the fly shop and buy material to try and match a hatch. And what happened was my fly was like 5 sizes bigger than and it looked like a hairball. It looked like something a cat vomited up. And you throw it up there in a column of feeding trout, and all of a sudden it gets bit, and you just kind of go, what the heck? It didn't look anything like what was hatching. And over time, you just kind of know that the dead drift, other things are going to make a difference.
Yeah.
Because remember when stomach pumping was so popular?
Is it not now?
Well, I don't do it anymore because I just don't use that. I don't care.
Yeah, it's not a big worry, right?
Back in the 90s, I was pumping stomachs, and I would find twigs, partially like half of a minnow, gravel, big pieces of plants, and I'd go, what in the world? Yeah, and fish, they're just not that picky.
That one's always perplexed me. If you could fish for an hour with the tiniest speck of moss on your fly and catch nothing, right?
Yeah.
Bring it in, take it off, first cast, hook a fish. But you pump a fish and they have moss on them. How do they just tell the difference?
Like big bulges, yeah. Like, what in the world? How come my moss wasn't acceptable?
Right. Who knows?
So, Lance, what are some of the countries you've been to with Team USA, and do you have a favorite place that you've been for fishing?
I don't know if I have a favorite place. I have some favorite places. Favorite places would probably be New Zealand, Northern Italy, Slovenia, Bosnia was really cool. But I've also been to Portugal and Finland and Scotland, Norway. I'm forgetting some probably, but anyhow, yeah, they're all very, very cool in their own right, and they're all very different. The clear waters in Bosnia and Slovenia were awesome. New Zealand, of course, can't go to New Zealand without having a great time. It's beautiful, great fishing. Northern Italy was probably a surprise one for me, really a shocker. I felt like, I don't think of Italy as fly fishing as well, but you get to Northern Italy and it's more like Austria, mountainous and just really, really pretty.
Yeah.
I heard you say once, we were having a conversation a long time ago about the fishing around here, and I was just getting into going to Idaho for most of my fishing, and you're like, I've fished a lot of places, but I always want to fish Utah. You were like, I can't remember exactly how you worded it, but you were always wanting to come back here to the Provo.
That's fair to say. I get that way a lot when I travel. I'm reminded of how good we have it here. Although it's a very populated place and it's getting more crowded all the time.
Yeah.
Even with all of that, we still have great fishing here. And you wouldn't be alone there. I've had that same conversation with lots of people that working in the shops, I'm amazed at how many people won't fish Utah. They live here and they kind of turn their nose up at Utah fishing. Oh, Utah? I don't fish Utah. Okay, well, I like the surrounding states as well, but if you only fish surrounding states, then you're pretty limited in how often you can fish, because you're talking a 3 to 4 or 5 hour drive to just get where you want to go, instead of, right here is 15 minutes from my house. I'm sure you guys are probably closer than I am. So I can fish this 100 days a year, and I still love getting to other places. But Utah certainly has a special place in my heart for fishing, and it's just really good. If it was really poor fishing, I don't think I'd feel that way.
Just on a note about the Provo River, and there's different sections. We're on the section below Olmsted Diversion Dam. Bait is allowed on this section. Still gets fly fished heavily, but when you first started fishing the river to now, is there any point in time in that span where that was your favorite, like say from 99 to 2004, that was your favorite? Or was the mid-90s your favorite? Or is now your favorite? What, as far as the fishing quality goes?
Fishing quality is subject to my memory, and that's always sketchy, right? But I think the mid-90s to right around early 2000, the lower Provo in my life probably fished the best. But I would argue right now it's fishing better than it has in a decade. More nice-sized fish. But I also would say that, at that time I didn't understand all the things that I do now, and I'm still learning a ton about the river every time I go. And so I think that my experience now is better because I'm catching a lot more fish now, but I don't think that's so much that the river has improved as much as my fishing has improved.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I know before whirling disease hit the river, especially in the early 90s to maybe up to 2000, the fishing was awesome, at least in my memory. But like you're saying, that's a long time ago, and things change.
The lower Provo, I think, has seen a lot of changes from a couple things. One is when they built Jordanelle, it seemed to change Deer Creek in that Deer Creek itself probably hasn't changed, but the river coming out of it now doesn't experience very high flows, so it's much more silty than it used to be. Gets a lot more weed growth than it used to. Where all the Uinta's runoff used to run into Deer Creek and it would fill and spill, and the high flows would kind of flush it out and have a normal river cycle. It doesn't get that anymore. So I think that the river's in a little bit of trouble there. That could stand some high flushing flows every year. The other thing that to me made a difference in the 90s, especially, the Division of Wildlife in Utah had a program where they were stocking cutthroats in the river.
Loved it.
The cuts are dumb as a post, right? So they're really easy to catch, which I relied heavily on. They were fun fish. They didn't get really big. Rare to see one over 15 inches. 17 is about as big as I ever remember seeing. You catch a lot of them. They're 12, 13, 14-inch fish. But I think more importantly than the fishing for them was that by stocking small cutthroats, they were feeding the browns. Yeah. And when they were feeding the browns, the brown trout were getting larger, and we don't have that minnow base right now. We have a lot of sculpins in the river, a few whitefish, and then lots of trout fry, but not many dumb hatchery raised trout fry.
There was some big browns back then.
Yeah.
And that was way before the time of Instagram, Facebook, or any of that. And I would carry a camera with me, but a lot of times I would catch a big fish and think nothing of it.
Yeah.
Wish it was like
I would argue in the early to mid 90s you could catch a 20-inch fish pretty well every day on the lower Provo, and sometimes a fish slightly larger than that. Now I wouldn't say that I didn't see a lot of 24-inch fish, but I saw a lot of 18 to 21, every once in a while a 22-inch fish.
Yeah, they were a lot more prevalent.
And now you see less and less of that size fish for sure. Although this year and last year also I've seen quite a few more that are in that 18 to 20-inch range. For me, the lower Provo has changed a lot recently because I got a little fly craft, those little rafts, and it's made the Provo a totally new experience for me, just floating the river. In fact, I think you guys would love it. Being big streamer fanatics, pounding the banks with streamers on the lower from the boat changes things. You can cover so much more water. I'm sure you guys drift boat fish in other places and maybe even have a fly craft, I don't know. But it's changed the river for me to where we fish streamers early spring and then we just fish dry as tight to the banks all summer, and into the fall. I would argue that for me on the lower Provo now, I catch more large fish on dry flies inches from the bank than I do even throwing really big streamers. I still catch some small fish too, but compared to wade fishing, if I'm wading and nymphing or fishing a dry or drying a dropper, I tend to catch a lot more of the Provo River runts, the average fish that are 10, 12, 14 inches. Yeah. And floating it, we see a lot more of the 15 to 20 inch fish for some reason. There's something about the high summertime flows that push fish to the banks, and something about fishing a big dry fly tight to the banks that brings those fish up. I don't catch as many fish as I do when I'm wade fishing and nymphing, but enough to keep it really interesting, and that's totally changed the lower for me.
But they're bigger.
Yeah, a little larger, yeah.
So do you have a favorite species of fish to fish for?
No, not really. I like all fish. All fish are good. If you had to pick one fish, if you made me pick one, I'd probably pick a brown trout, but I love catching rainbows and cuts and carp and anything. I'm not really particular.
You just like tight lines.
I love saltwater fishing too. Yeah, I'm in whatever we got, right? Catfish on a fly, bluegill. I'm good.
Well, Lance, we both grew up fishing this river, and there's a lot of people that might come out here from surrounding states, maybe even from another country. What's a tip, just really quick, that could set them up for success? Not your super duper secrets. They got to pay for that.
I don't have super duper secrets, man. There's no secrets on this river, right? Secrets on the Provo. I think most people get hung up again on what fly to use and what rock to stand on. And the river has so many fish per mile that you don't have to worry about which rock to stand on. I always tease people that as you float the river, it's amazing to see the guides are always in the same hole. Same guide, same hole, 5 days a week kind of a thing. And I didn't realize that till you float by them every single day. And some of them have 2 or 3 favorite holes, but same place, same thing over and over and over. To me, that would drive me nuts. When I guide, I tend to mix it up a lot, go to different accesses and on and on. But I think learning to fish the river rather than just worry about one spot, because there are so many thousands of fish per mile, it doesn't really matter where you go.
Yeah. Well, and on this river, it's used so heavily. There's a huge population base just on the other side of these mountains. You come up the canyon, there's so many people on it. You have to be adaptable. You have to find a spot where there isn't somebody and then fish that spot. So it's good. I don't think you can ever fish the Provo anymore and go, I'm going to fish that hole. You're in a specific hole, because when you get there, there's probably going to be somebody.
Chances are somebody's going to beat you to it.
Yeah.
That's the other glory about floating. You don't have to worry about the hole. You just pound the banks the whole way down.
Yeah, that's
True.
smart.
So Lance, I wanted to ask you about gear and equipment, because fly fishing is becoming really, really popular. A lot of newer guys to the sport, like me. Jason converted me to fly fishing just a year and a half ago.
Nice.
So a new guy starting out, if is there one piece of gear equipment that you say is more important than the other? If a guy's going to splurge a little, or is it the setup? Is the tippet more important, or is it the rod or the reel or the line?
It's a good question. I think it's hard to narrow down one item of gear. For trout fishing, the reel is probably the least important piece, but that said, if you're going to fish a lot, you're going to fish often, you do yourself a favor by buying a high quality reel. It doesn't have to be a $500 reel, but buying something better than the cheapest reel you could find. Just last you longer. I would argue that the rod probably does the most work as far as accuracy and fish fighting and tippet protection, etc. But that said, most rods will outperform most users. Sounds like a strange thing to say, but I'm afraid it's the truth. Most $200 rods, the average fly fisher won't be able to max out the casting ability of that rod, the casting power. So there's a lot of value in fly fishing nowadays, and I don't know that you could say one piece is. I mean, all of it's critical, right? You got to have strong tippet, you got to have a good leader, you got to have a good fly, a good hook. I think having all of those things, to me, competition-wise, it makes you think about all those little details. What can you do to just give yourself the slightest edge? Super sharp hook, super strong tippet, super accurate lightweight rod, fly line that shoots through the guides, and when you put all those things together, you stack the deck in your favor. And whether you're a competition angler or a recreational angler, at the end of the day, you're just trying to catch a fish. And if you can put all those things together to make that easier, that's the end goal. So I would argue all of them are important. Which you decide to put the most money into is personal decision. And the fly definitely. I'm amazed at how many people will buy really cheap hooks, or if they don't tie flies, they buy the least expensive flies they can find, and they're on ground point hooks and they're tied very poorly. They come apart quickly.
Yeah.
A quality fly is something that's not easy to find all the time.
Mm-hmm. So if you had one piece of advice for a novice fly fisherman, what would that be?
I think we've covered that really. In our fly fishing classes at Cabela's, my couple takeaways really are cast on the grass. Go practice casting. Most people never get anywhere near efficient at casting, right? We don't expect everybody to be able to cast 100 feet. That's not needed for most trout fishing.
Yeah.
But I'm amazed at how many people are passionate about fly fishing, but they won't spend 20 minutes every other week or something just working on their cast. If you're a golfer, you can't be an efficient golfer without working on your golf swing. Mm-hmm. But people go fishing and they can barely get the fly where they want. They think they're doing it, but if they go fishing with somebody that's actually good at what they do, they're amazed at how efficient and accurate and ability to deal with wind and so on the whole process becomes. And I think so learning to cast and practicing casting, which is not done on the water but done on the grass, number one. And then number two, don't focus on the fly so much. I feel like most New Anglers are worried about the fly way too much and not worried about their presentation and their accuracy and reading the water and that sort of thing. That makes a much bigger difference.
Awesome. Good advice.
Definitely.
Well, we're out here broadcasting in the park, and the lawn maintenance guys are working their way this way, so we better wrap this up. But really appreciate having you, Lance.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Great tips, great advice. Jason, any last words?
Oh, no, I just really appreciate Lance and his furtherance of fly fishing, being a good ambassador for the sport, representing our country. And he's done a lot. I mean, the Rainbow Warrior is a fly that I've used a lot. Great fly. There's a few others that you've spun up. Yeah, so we just really appreciate you coming on. We'll have to have you on again.
Love to do it anytime.
Yeah, awesome. Likewise. Okay, thanks for listening, guys. Stay safe in all of your fishing adventures and stick 'em solid.
All right, friends, thanks for listening to the Drop Jaw Flies podcast. We'd love to hear your feedback. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, or our website, www.dropjawflies.com. Please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, or our YouTube channel. Now get out there and hook a big one and stick 'em solid.